When we think back to our childhood, we can come up with at least one or two things our parents said or did that was crazy, especially growing up in a brown household. Every culture has its own ideals and thoughts about how children should grow up. I'm sure you recognize some of these sentences. Do as I say and not as I do. Or the classic one that says, because we didn't have the same opportunities. Or Kamala's daughter is doing so well, why can't you be like her? These are things that a lot of us have heard growing up and has definitely left an emotional scar. But brown parenting is changing. And to talk about this today, we have Raviena with us today. Hi, Raviena.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. So we're here to talk to you about brown parenting, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it used to be, how it was for you growing up, and how it is for you being a parent. You have a very beautiful daughter, so you know a thing or two about parenting.
Well, hopefully I should by now.
Yeah, no. But before we get into all that, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Ravinea Manotheepan, and I came to Norway when I was 2 years old. I was born in Sri Lanka, and my parents moved from the warm and sunny Jaffna to the north of Norway and to a small town called Kabelvåg, all the way up in Lofoten. I will say that I've grown up with two cultures, and I've seen the benefits, but also the challenges. And now I have my own family and a child, so I would try to pass on the good things about being part of two cultures.
Yeah. So first off, if anyone doesn't know what Lofoten is, please do go and Google it, because going from Jaffna to one of the northern parts of Norway is a culture shock for sure. And you said you were 2 years old?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So do you remember anything from back then? How was it to just go from Sri Lanka to ice cold Norway that must have been difficult.
I have like glimpse of memories, and we also been there visiting the place in the town, both like a few years after we moved from there, and also this year actually. I'm not sure if everything that I remember is actual memories or if it's like printed in my mind from my parents.
Yeah.
But when I think back on the feelings I have from that time, it never felt foreign in any way. I mean, the people there was very kind, open, and I guess they were very interested in our culture as well. I just remember my dad telling me like in the beginning, one of the people there were like they wanted to touch his skin and see if the color matched off. But at the same time, it was not in any bad way. They were just curious and wanted to know, and absolutely wanted to help in any way they could. And I think that type of welcoming to a place so different from Jaffna made it easier for our parents to get into the culture and getting to learn the language and everything as well. So it was even if it was extreme, it was a nice way of getting to know a new culture because you didn't have a choice, right? So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So how did your parents, because it would be a big responsibility for them to make sure that you didn't lose yourself into Norwegian culture. So how did you feel like growing up? How did you feel like they made an effort for you to keep your culture? How did you grow up?
Well, we lived in Kabelvåg and Lofoten for 2 years of my life, or 1.5 to 2 years. So I think they got everything they needed there, like from work to learning the language, place to live, and everything. But the reason they moved to Oslo was because of the cultural thing, I'm guessing, because there was not that many Tamil people in Lofoten. And also when it came to, at that time at least, groceries and Tamil food and stuff like that, I remember we only had Tamil food once a week.
Oh, wow. Because can you give us a timeline? So what year was this?
So this was 1986.
All right. So in the late 80s,
Yeah.
mid 80s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that was one of the main reasons they wanted to come to Oslo, because there was more Tamil people, and also my mom's siblings and my dad's relatives. So that was one way of getting into the culture. And also after we moved to Oslo, of course, it was learning Tamil. At that time, we didn't have a Tamil school, so me and my cousin learned Tamil from my mom and my mom's sister,
Yeah.
and my brother as well. So, and then after a few years, Tamil school started, and they did what they could to get us into the culture.
Mm.
Same with the bringing us to the temple, but also before it was actually formed the temple, they were teaching us, Theorams, or and teaching us how to celebrate the Hindu tradition, or the holidays. So I guess, and also obviously the cultural things like dancing and Bharatanatyam. I think the most of the reason for they putting us in these things was not only for the language, but also for the culture.
100%, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you have a daughter that is born and raised in Norway, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is the biggest difference for you and your daughter growing up? Because you both are growing up in two different cultures. Uh,
Yeah.
but obviously, there are some differences in how you grew up and how she's growing up. What would you say the
Yeah.
main differences are?
Well, I think there's many differences, but the main differences, I guess, is okay. We're talking about two cultures, Norwegian and Tamil. But now, compared to when I was growing up, there's actually three cultures, because you have the Norwegian, you have the Tamil, and you have the mixed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the mixed one is actually is a big group with lots of things that I think people don't really think about. So the biggest difference for at least for being a parent, I guess now, is I know how it is to be in the position that my daughter is in. And it might be easier for me to understand her difficulties.
Yeah.
And maybe the differences is that she have, in many ways, it's easier, not only because I understand her, but because for
Mm.
her friends, it's more natural to have people like her in their environment.
100%. I
So
I felt
yeah.
like when I was growing up and when I had to go to Sangita class, or I felt like I had to hide it from my friends.
Yeah,
I When they
exactly.
were asking me, "So what did you do this weekend?" I had to lie because I was kind of hiding that part of my identity. But I guess your daughter can just be like, "Oh, I'm going to Bharatanatyam class," and a white friend would actually understand that.
Yeah, and they come to our house, and they call when they visit our parents, because they're our neighbors. They say Amama instead of Tansi's grandma, because for them it's natural to hear Tansi say Amama. So it's stuff like that, and it's all natural for Tansi to bring them to her Bharatanatyam programs, and vice
Oh, that's really
versa,
good.
right?
That's
So
really good. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's the way it should go, just because the world's getting smaller anyway. And my daughter is much easier for my daughter to. I don't think she even thinks of that it's different what she does compared to the other kids, and it's also because there are many more people doing things like her do, and from both from other cultures, but also other Tamil people.
Yeah.
And just because my friends' daughters, like my daughter's friends, have parents who knew what I did.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
way, for them, it's natural in all of their generations as well.
Yeah.
While when we were younger, my friends' parents didn't understand what we were doing, right? So
Yeah.
I guess that's a big difference as well.
Yeah, and then I guess it's in a way it's easier, but it's also a bit difficult because the the lining, like 'cause we had clear lines of what was Norwegian and what was Tamil, and now it's kind of like it's like a gray line.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it can be good and bad things about that. Do you feel like your parents were more strict with you than you were with your daughter?
Yeah, in many ways, I would say yes. But then if you ask my parents, they would say that I'm more strict. But I think it depends on what type of things you're strict about, right? So when it came to our parents, they had faced a lot of obstacles when it came to education and settling down in a new country, economy. Now we don't have all those things to kind of. I mean, I know we have felt it when we was younger, but it's different what you pass on after what you experience on yourself.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
for our parents, they would obviously be even more focused on really like doing good on when it comes to education, that you need to stand on your own feet and all these things. And of course that's values that I really appreciate and that I also want to bring to my daughter. But at the same time, I think it's harder for me to be as strict as they were when it comes to those things as they were to us.
Yeah, because it's a
Uh,
classic thing, like I said in the beginning, like, because we didn't have the opportunity. Like, that's what
yeah,
I kept
exactly.
hearing all the time, right? But for
Yeah,
you can't say that because you did have the opportunity, and
exactly.
it was a different kind of scenario for
Yeah.
you.
But and at the same time, I try to tell my daughter stories about how our parents came here and what they did and how difficult they had it. But I think it made a bigger impression. It will definitely make a bigger impression if you see how your parents struggle than hearing about it from
Yeah.
like third step. So obviously, and again for my daughter's daughter, again it will be even diluted, that feeling.
Yeah, but even for
So
even for me, who is a second generation,
yeah,
there's a big difference between me and my sibling. So for her, she probably experienced it much differently than I did because I didn't see them struggle. I only heard about it,
exactly.
right? I only heard about,
Same thing with my brother as well. I mean, even if he's just 4 years younger than me, but it's something to do with as the years go by, they came to Norway, they established themselves, so you see less of it as the longer they lived in this country, right? So
Yeah, and 100%. So I know what you're saying when it just gets like, what are you talking about? Because for me, I only hear like the sentence and it's more like nagging for me than,
yeah.
yeah. But I can understand that they went through a lot to get where they are, but it's
Yeah.
not the same as experiencing it.
We actually had a discussion about this at my workplace as well, or when it comes to higher education and the percentage of non-ethnical Norwegian people getting a higher education. And maybe there's a trend, or I think it's a quite strong trend, that there's non-ethnical Norwegians getting more into doctors and lawyers and engineers.
The
uh,
three only options.
but at the same time, I don't think this will be um, the same way in the next generations to come, because it's something to do with, as we talked about, being pushed to actually grab the opportunity and doing whatever you can to achieve those goals. I don't think our children or their children will have the same strong feeling about doing, really grabbing the opportunity. Obviously, they will, whatever we're going to tell them, but still, the feeling would not be as strong because they haven't felt the pain.
Yeah.
So I think the
And speaking
correlation.
of that, because you're a doctor yourself,
Yeah.
right? So, do you think that you felt more pressure from your parents to become a doctor than what your daughter is now? Because your daughter, I don't know. So, do you feel like she's more like, I can become whatever I want, while you had three options? Do you feel like that?
Uh, well, yeah, I think definitely my daughter have more open choices, but that's just because my parents never told me that I have to become a doctor.
No, but
But
that's the thing. I feel like it's an
mm,
untold. It's that's the thing with brown parenting. It's the untold sentence. Like, it's untold behavior, right? So
yeah,
we expect that from them, and they expect it from us, but none of us say it out loud. It's just
yeah,
expectations that are there.
yeah.
So maybe if they didn't, even if they didn't tell you, did you feel that pressure?
I definitely felt the pressure that, I mean, at some point I remember my elementary school teacher asking me what I wanted to be when I got older, and I remember I told her, "Oh, I really want to become a doctor." And then she was like, "Oh, why so?" And I was like, I like the feeling of helping people." And but I later, I think when I was almost not first grade, but third or fourth grade or something, I talked to my mom, and I remember she told me that she just missed the entering medical school in Sri Lanka because of some points, and it was the difference between the groups and so on. And that just increased the feeling that I wanted to become a doctor.
Mm.
But it was never like a pressure for this and that, but it was definitely a pressure that you should do the absolute best
Yeah.
that you could on all tests. And the argument behind that was because we got this opportunity, that you got this opportunity we didn't have, and we're living in this country, we should not give up this chance, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, no, it's that's the thing. Like it always comes back to that. Oh, we didn't have the opportunity, so you have to live it out for us.
Yeah.
But I guess for your daughter, it's different because you grew up in Norway and you did have the opportunities, and yeah, it's a different scenario for her. So, like you said, I think with the generations, it will be different, hopefully. And
Yeah.
but what would you say that you wish your parents did differently that you're doing now to your daughter?
Um, well, I think I would be, I would have appreciated if they showed that they were happy with whatever I did. I know they were, but then there, even if even if you know you did everything you could do, and there was not anything more, and you maybe you got the top grade or whatever, and it was like, okay, and the next, and the next
Yeah.
plan is,
Yeah, and I think
well,
that it goes for a lot of people, Tamil people or brown children. Like, it's not in the culture to show appreciation and love the way we're used to in the Western world.
yeah,
Not only because that's because they didn't grow up with that, right? They didn't show us.
yeah,
And you have a roof over your head, food on the table. That is a love we're showing. And that's their kind of way of showing love, which I understand because that's what they're used to.
yeah,
But you and we grew up in a mix of cultures where we saw kids get that love from their parents, and we kind of incorporate. I guess you're incorporating that with your daughter and actually showing her, you did your best, and let's just,
absolutely,
yeah, exactly. So I think that is, and obviously that leaves it an emotional scar. Even though we laugh about it today, it is because you always feel like, oh, is this good enough? And that
yeah. I mean,
feeling.
I still do.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you sit with that
Yeah,
feeling until this day. Even if you are good enough, we question ourselves because we grew up thinking, "Oh, this is not good enough," and we never got
mm,
that acceptance in the way we wanted to get the acceptance.
yeah,
Obviously, even if our parents love us a lot, I don't think they know how to show it, and I think that's very important for the next generation to,
absolutely.
show.
But I just have to point out one thing that I think is, which I really appreciate from them, and that I would take further, and also tell my daughter, is like, even if it's like a cliche, but you probably heard this as well. You can make anything in life as long as you work hard enough, and there's always a solution, no
Yeah,
matter what.
yeah, yeah.
But that actually is a good thing to keep on to and to pass on to the
Yeah.
next generation as well.
100%. I think one thing I would take from my parents as well is the resilience, like especially my mom, like where she would always say, you don't give up. Like that kind of like motivation. I don't know
Yeah,
where she gets it from, but I mean, I'm working on it, but I think that's one thing I would want my kids to have as well. That constant motivation and finding it wherever it is. But yeah, I am. Thank you for sharing a lot with us today. We can go on and on about this. Um, I have one question for you though before we go towards the end. And that is, or I have two, or I have actually a lot of questions. So let's start with the first one. You have a brother. So did you feel like it was different growing up? As in, it was different rules for him than it was for you?
um, uh, I can't say that for sure, but I think definitely that at that time I thought, oh, he's getting a lot of slack, much more than me just because he's a boy. But at the same time, when I think back, I also think he was 4 years, or he's 4 years younger than me. So and he was kind of more like, like you said, he didn't really care as much as I did regarding like what he think my parents would think, or he would just ask things and do, or maybe do things without asking, and so I think with years in one country, you'll get more into that culture and also bend the rules even further. And I guess our parents is the same way, So that's one thing. But I also know, maybe, of course, as in Tamil culture, being a boy in some ways makes things easier. But at the same time, I know my parents have always been like treating us quite equal. But and I know for myself that I might have not done things because I was in my head thinking, okay, there's no point of asking. I wouldn't be allowed to do it anyway.
Yeah.
While my brother would just ask, and then he would get a yes. But I would have never asked, and so I might have gotten a yes, but I don't know,
Yeah, so it's more like you're restricting yourself, and maybe it's a question of whether you were the firstborn, and more like
exactly.
100%. All right, so we're coming to an end now, and I have now one question left for you, and that is, what would you tell your younger self?
I think I would say be more open to your parents and talk to them, because they might understand you better than you assume. And talk to them and give them the benefit of the doubt, because they have been living in this country quite many years, and they actually made a big step moving from one country to another, learning the language and getting to know the culture. So even if they're trying to get you into, holding into one culture, they do understand more than you might think. And they would never know if you don't tell them. So ends up with communication.
Yeah, and this is something I tell a lot of kids as well. Like, we need to meet them halfway as well. We can't expect, especially when it comes to mental health, we can't expect them to start the conversation. It's our responsibility as well to start the conversation and to bring it to the table. And if they don't listen, that's it. But you try. This is not a conversation that's just going to be held in 5 minutes and then you're done with it. You have to keep trying, and you have to meet them halfway. It's a conversation and not a monologue, right? So 100% I agree with you, and I would recommend people to bring up these topics with their parents and take the first step, because they're not going to do it.
Absolutely. And I think this is part of creating a third culture. As I said in the beginning, we have in Norway, we have the Norwegian culture, then you have the Tamil culture, and then you have the mixed culture.
Yeah.
And the mixed one is all cultures developed with years, but I think the mixed culture is actually born now, like in this generation.
Yeah.
And it's actually different from country to country. So the Norwegian Tamil community, or the culture in the Norwegian Tamil community, completely different from the culture in the English Tamil community, or in UK, for instance. So I think it's and just to make the connection between the generations, is important that both of them talk openly to each other.
100%. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I learned a lot of things. I hope you guys did too, and we will catch you in the next episode.